Now that you can summarize entire articles, we are going to focus on quoting. Remember that a quote is for information where the language and original style matters. For research, this is typically quoting results, like quotes from an interview or numbers from a survey. For quoting something directly, you should first introduce the author. Give that credit. Tell the reader the name of that author. Remember, names are very important in research. As well as saying the name of the author, you should use a signal verb that signals that a quote is coming. Two important notes here. First, you don't need to state the title of the article. Academic article titles are very long and lengthy. They take up lots of space in your text, which is distracting and not as relevant for the reader. All we really want is the author's name and year. Second, signal verbs. These are verbs, again, that indicate that a quote is coming up in the sentence. Some safe, familiar, but weak signal verbs are says, states, writes. They lack a lot of direction. Some stronger ones to improve your writing would be things like proposes, suggests, demonstrates, argues, proves. After you've introduced the author and that a quote is coming up, provide an explanation. This will give context, purpose, or point out what is important in the quote, what the reader should pay attention to. When you do this, the reader is guided to understand the interpretation you're making. Without it, you risk the reader not making the connection you want them to make. You kind of just dump a quote in and they're gonna gloss over it. So introduce the author with their name and then a signal verb, provide some explanation, and then include the quote using quotation marks. After that, at the very end, you would include a citation. You always need a citation, unless that information has been used in that introductory part or that credit section. So a citation typically has author, year, page number. If you introduce the author's name in the beginning of the sentence, then your citation would only have year and page number. Here's a template I found online. You can see that it has all those parts. Feel free to screenshot this and save it so you can use it as a reference or a guide. Next, I have an example I made up where I highlighted the 3 parts. Can you tell which part is which step in the process of integrating or citing a quote? I have more examples. These are actually quotes that need help. They are poorly integrated. When you look at these quotes, can you tell what is missing? Take note of your reaction to these quotes. Are you confused? Maybe that means the quote lacks explanation. Do you not trust it? It probably needs a better citation. Or is it too long and boring? Sounds like it needs a signal verb and better explanation. So try identifying what's wrong here and maybe even fix them up. So why am I hammering this idea of integrating quotes with explanation and all these parts? I'm sure you've gotten by just saying, according to Smith, or Smith said. It's okay, but it's awkward and frankly quite boring to read. It gets repetitive. By integrating, you improve your credibility and ethics because you're having these citations and giving acknowledgement. You provide better support for your argument and logic because you identify what is important through your explanation. It gives the purpose and direction to the paper. It also makes your piece easier to follow, so people want to read your paper and then they understand your paper, which I hope that's your intention with writing. It also asserts your ability to analyze and evaluate. It really shows that you are being a critical thinker. Additionally, using signal verbs and some explanation elevates your writing vocabulary to be similar to those of academics and professionals. Without integrating quotes, the quote is dumped. It's random and awkward. So again, let's try and integrate our quotes so they have much more purpose in our writing. Some more information regarding quotes. The first is that you don't always have to quote an entire line from a source, because maybe you only care about a certain word or phrase in that quote. You can do something called chunking then. It looks like the example below the space called chunking. where you would only put quotation marks around the specific words and phrases you want to focus on. Chunking can be really effective for getting right to the point for the reader. They don't have to dig through the rest of the quote, they go right to the point. Another piece of information is mentioning block quotes. Yes. So a block quotation is when you use a quote that is longer than 4 lines. When you use this, you have to signal to the reader that this is all one quote, because if it gets so long, sometimes your reader forgets that they're reading a quote. To signal to the reader this is special, you would use specific formatting, and you would have to look up APA or MLA style to understand how to format that. It's usually with different indentation, no quotation marks, and some wonky margins. You'd have to look it up. But if that sounds intimidating, additionally, just in general, avoid block quotations. You don't really have a need to use that much content from a secondary source. Instead, you should really focus on selective quotations, figuring out what is really important to show here. An example I have is I once had a student turn in 3 pages of block quotes and was like, here's my essay. And I could not grade that because honestly, so little of it was the student's own words. You can't call it your paper if it's mostly someone else's quotations. And the last few points on here is just about punctuation, using ellipses or single quotes, just so you better understand how to modify or be more selective with your quotations. So, as mentioned before, quotes aren't very common in research writing, but they can be useful in select places. So as you read your scholarly sources, take note of what quotes the authors use. Why do you think they're using quotes here and not a paraphrase or summary?